Hi everyone, Amy here. Just a quick trigger warning for this episode. We talk about, because the documentary talks about, sexual assault, rape, domestic violence, and physical abuse. So if those things trigger you, please skip this episode. If you do stick around, enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome to Little Miss Recap, the podcast where we can't get enough murder. Can't get enough murder docs, just can't. Can't stop, won't stop. My name's Amy Archer, and I'm here today with Jodene Weber from Caught in My Web. And you are, Jodie, tell everybody, you are a retired FBI?
That's correct. I spent 22 years as a special agent in the FBI. I worked in 3 field offices, Atlanta, Norfolk, Virginia, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow. Okay, so where are you now? Where do you live now?
I live just south of Pittsburgh. I retired here 4 years ago, and I am full-time mom and podcaster.
Yay! Welcome to the club. I'm
Thank you
full-time
for
mom,
having
but
me.
my girls are, I have twin daughters, they're 17. So like I'm not really momming a lot. You know what I
My
mean?
twins will be 17 in May, and I
You
have
have
boy-girl twins. Yes. So we have a lot in common, Amy.
Yes. It's kind of a nightmare having 2 twin daughters. Like it's rough.
Well, I'll tell you, I am thankful I have one of each because I
I
don't
bet.
think they compete as much as
Yeah.
other, twins might who are the same gender. And, I'll tell you, junior year is no joke.
No joke. And we're doing the college. Now, do your kids want to go to the same school? Well, they're probably not as bonded as mine are because they're
They're
same sex.
they're extremely close, but they are
Mhm.
completely different,
Yeah.
which is very interesting, because especially when you're the mother or the parent of twins, you say one thing and one takes it one way and one takes it completely the other.
Yes.
So it's just really interesting. But no, my kids probably will not go to the same school. They probably
Yeah.
won't even be in the same state.
Mm.
But you know what? It's really good because they're expressing their independence.
Yeah,
So,
mine too. They're both like, we need to get away from each other. We can't stand each other right now. Like they're just,
well,
and it's
go
so
ahead.
funny because when they were little, I was so grateful that I had girls because the energy of little boys is sometimes a little too much for me. Now I would kill for a teenage boy. I
Well,
would
let me
kill for
tell
one.
you, I have identical twins next door,
Hmm.
and they do room together in college. They're
Really?
afraid to be apart, and that
Oh,
almost concerns my neighbor. The
yes.
fact that,
Yes.
girls, you can't be together forever. You're going to have to split eventually,
Yeah, unless they do like something on that show Smothered and they marry twin husbands and then they want to have babies at exactly the same time. It's real wild.
which is a
Real
whole
wild.
nother podcast.
A whole other podcast, a whole other thing. So I was telling you before we started, and I just want to tell my audience, I loved Jodie when I heard her on Kate Casey really talking about Scott Peterson and this whole Innocence Project, the LA Innocence Project
Yes, thank you very
situation.
much. Yes, I have some
And
very definitive thoughts on Scott Peterson.
I immediately sent it to my mother, who is a lady of a certain age, sitting on her couch, retired, solving murders, and she was very interested in hearing that interview because she's in agreement, and I think that's where we landed. That I feel like Scott Peterson is guilty, and he's
Well,
right where he needs to be.
to me, I think people fall in one of 3 camps. Either they believe, yes, he was guilty, and yes, it was proven at trial.
Mm-hmm.
He's innocent and he got a raw deal, or he's guilty, but the prosecution did not meet their burden.
Yes.
And, I think it's hard in today's day and age where everything is so immediate and so digital and recorded, and there's cameras and iPhones everywhere. I think it's hard for people to comprehend, especially who weren't necessarily adults when he went to trial, to understand how circumstantially for a jury means, motive, and opportunity were presented.
Right.
And many jurors felt, yes, he was guilty. In fact,
Yeah.
unanimously, they all felt he was
Yeah.
guilty. Now, if he got a new trial in this day and age, would they be able to do the same thing? I'm not so certain.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It was such a wild time. I just remember, I was, what year was it? 2003 or 4?
Yes, yes.
So I was in my 20s and I just remember being fixated by it. I couldn't get enough of it. And then, I don't know. I think I felt at the time that the media made the case that he was guilty. But as I started doing the research and we watched and I'm somebody who I can't just take one point of view. I have to watch like 10 documentaries on the same subject to see the different lens. I really felt like this is why I'm personally not a big fan of the death penalty, because I do believe if you feel like you got a raw deal at trial that you should receive an appeal if a court deems it. Um but and so like if they want to give him another, if they want to retry him, fine. But I think he is where he needs to be. I think he is guilty. That's my personal opinion.
Well, I agree with you. I
Yeah.
think he is as well. And I've said all along, if by some chance this LA Innocence Project goes forward and they get the DNA testing they're requesting and they get to review evidence, even if it's a technicality that gets him a new trial,
Mhm.
I do believe, if I'm proved wrong, if there is some sort of, DNA testing or some new evidence that wasn't presented previously that comes forward that exonerates him, I will eat my words.
Sure.
But as of right now, I'm pretty convinced they got the
Yeah.
right guy.
Same. All right, so let's talk about a documentary where a case is not really made. Well, it kind of is, but it isn't. We'll talk about that at the end. So we're talking about The Truth About Jim 2024 on HBO Max, and it's a documentary that is filmed by Sierra Barter, who is the granddaughter in the story. And she has decided to make this, 4-part docuseries about her step grandfather, Jim Mordecai. Now, what are your first impressions of this documentary? Because I had some issues with it structurally.
I
I'm wondering if you
agree.
did too.
I agree. I had a hard time with the first episode to episode and a half. I
Mhm.
felt that it was very heavily focused on sexual assaults, and trigger warning to your listeners, but a lot of coverage of sexual assaults that
Yeah.
many participants in this documentary had experienced.
Mhm.
And so you see a lot of that trauma, and it takes a while to really get to Jim
Yes.
and what the suspicions are or allegations are that they're going to launch against Jim, the step grandfather.
Mhm.
And so it was difficult because I wasn't sure if this was displaced trauma, where instead of holding the perpetrator for sexual assaults that Sierra had experienced, instead of holding them responsible, was she looking for someone else to hold responsible? So I was a
Right.
little bit disoriented by the lack of focus, shall we say.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it didn't know what it wanted to be. So the most interesting part of it to me was, just as a memoirist and a writer and somebody who's interested in like human relationships, the most interesting part of it to me was the generational trauma and sexual assault. But that's
Yes,
a different documentary. I feel
correct.
like. So, like, I felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be. And I was interested in the Jim Mordecai stuff specifically because we had a very similar situation in my family. Not that we had a murderer in the family that I know of. I always say that I know of. However, my grandfather died very young and my grandmother remarried, and the man she remarried was a total, abusive addict, just real bad.
Trouble.
And it caused a rift between her and my mother, and we had a very similar situation. So I think I was kind of interested in seeing the story of these women and how they come back together. But again, that's a different documentary than they were
Correct.
framing it as.
Correct. And I think when I look at it, you see, as we eventually become introduced to Jim and his personality and the narcissistic characteristics of it, you see how he alienates the women in his life from their other family members. He did
Yes.
it with the second wife,
Mhm.
with their two biological daughters, Jamie and
Mhm.
Melissa. He alienated those girls against their mother.
Yep.
And then once he divorces Janae and he marries Judy, who is Sierra's grandmother, he really alienates Judy from her daughter Shannon. And so that seemed to be the
Yes.
common pattern of him.
Yep. Yep.
So I thought
Yeah.
that was interesting.
So let's talk a little bit about him. So in episode 1, we are introduced to the family. So we have Sierra, her mother Shannon, and then Shannon's mother Judy. Sierra, we learn, was the victim of sexual assault when she was 18, and she was assaulted again years later. She wonders why she never reported this and why she never went to the police. And she says she thinks the answers to those questions are pointed to her family and their generational trauma. This is where we learn about Jim Mordecai, that, they lived in fear from him for so long. Judy, her mother, had married Shannon's dad in college in their senior year. They lived in Half Moon Bay, which I'm obsessed with California. And when I see any little California town, I'm like, can I move there? Can I afford to move there? I will never be able to afford to move there, but it looks beautiful. And Judy says when Shannon's dad left, she had really low self esteem. And Jim was Shannon's teacher and he started to woo her. And then we have this, like, he was real big in the Future Farmers of America, which I'm like, that's okay. But, sometimes we forget that Northern California is very
Agricultural.
agriculture-y.
Very
Yes.
much so. Very
Mm-hmm.
much so. Speaking of Scott Peterson, that area where they
Right.
lived was very agricultural. He was
Yes.
a
Yep.
fertilizer salesman. So yes,
Yes.
yes.
So he was problematic right from the start. He would flirt with Judy, but he would also like flirt with Shannon, and he would ask the rest of the class to grade her ass, and he tried to assault her in a greenhouse. Like, he was just, she didn't like him immediately, this
Correct.
daughter. And he would, oh my god, this part was wild. He would have his little Jim Jones glasses on and he'd be in his little blow up hot tub, and students would come over there when they were drunk and, like, quote unquote sober up in his hot tub.
Did that blow your mind?
It blew my mind, but also, I went to school in the 80s and 90s, and it
I
was like
did as
teachers
well.
used to ask us to go down to the corner store and get them a pack of smokes. So
Absolutely. I
it was a
mean, it was
wild
a
time.
different time. It was a different
Yes.
time.
So she said that Shannon tells us that there were rumors that Jim was sleeping with students. He'd call them sluts. Like, we see his misogyny and his hatred of women very early on and in many
Very
ways.
much. Yes,
Then
sexism, blatant.
blatant. Then she says, suddenly he's my stepfather. And
Can
I
you
was like,
imagine what a nightmare that must have been?
oh God. Like, because at least when it happened to my mother was already married and out of the house. So, like, she didn't have to live with this guy. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But,
But when it's your teacher who you don't like at school, and then
Jesus.
you have to go home to that guy,
Mm-mm.
I just can't imagine the tension.
So Sierra goes over to her grandmother's house, Judy's, and Judy has a lot of guilt. She says when Shannon was little, she was there all the time. And it's this interview is interlaced with Shannon telling the story as well. And Shannon's like, when my mom Judy, when I was little, she was there. She was baking cookies. She was picking me up from school. She was like mom of the year. And then she meets Jim, and all of a sudden she just fucks off to his house and is like never around. And Shannon is pretty much left alone. And this is, like you said, the isolating.
Correct. And really what narcissists do, they want all the attention for themselves. They are the center of the universe
Yep.
and everything else can fall by the wayside. And Judy capitulated.
Yeah, she did. So Shannon says, then she had Sierra, and she realized that she was afraid that Jim would hurt Sierra. So she started pulling away from Judy as an adult then. And she says she feels like she taught Sierra that life was unsafe. And that is
Yes.
that cycle of generational trauma right there.
Absolutely. I have that in my notes as well. And ultimately, that's what leads Sierra to understanding, why am I not dealing with my sexual assaults? Why am I afraid to live? What am I afraid to face? And you're right. That really is the documentary within the documentary.
Yeah, which I loved. Like, I could have watched these three women. I probably sobbed harder in episode 4 at the end when she's having that conversation with Judy about, or Judy and Shannon are having a conversation, and Judy's like, I know you thought I was weak and that, I didn't protect you. And I'm like, oh, I'm like a sobber. So I was just sobbing hysterically. But that to me was just so poignant and so riveting. I couldn't look away from it. So we learn, like you said, about the sexual assaults, and there's a lot here, guys.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to go through all of it because and I don't mean to sound reductive, but it is repetitive. We see a pattern forming with how he corners these girls. He, takes one to his ranch, and he just is constantly molesting, grooming. He's gross. He's a
Correct.
predator, essentially.
Correct.
Um, so there's Jamie and Melissa. They're his daughters by his second wife. And when their mom, who is Janae, and he divorced, he said, I'm on a mission to find you a new mother. And so then came Judy.
Right.
And so I'm trying to think of this from Shannon's point of view, and she sees her mother leave, and now her mother's over there raising two other kids.
I know. And I found that interesting because she seemed to really like Jamie and Melissa, the other
Yeah.
girls,
Yeah.
but she resented her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty much not only for the attention given to another family, but really the attention given to Jim and the
Yeah.
change.
Yep.
Not why are you not hearing my concerns, mom? That's what, and when you think about a teenager, teenage girls can be difficult. The mother-daughter bond is difficult to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole library full of books on that subject.
Mm-hmm.
But then you add in all these other dynamics on top of it.
Yeah.
And she didn't feel heard. She didn't feel seen.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm sure he knew what he was doing when he picked her. He saw that she was a single mother, struggling probably financially, and he does that a lot to a lot of his other kids. Like at one point he's telling Jamie and Melissa, "Tell your mother that you hate her." And if you like, who's going to want your mother if I'm not taking care of her? Like he uses, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, like how to articulate it, but he manipulates these girls into thinking that their mothers need him, because
Absolutely.
who's going to want a woman with four kids?
Well, and you look at that grandiose superiority and how delusional that is, that goes into his narcissism and his mental psychopathy.
Yeah,
And certainly the fact you see the alienation, that's classic alienation, like hate your mother. And that's weaponizing, that's using those girls as pawns.
it's gross. And
It's gross.
when I think it was Melissa was crying, remembering having to tell her mother that she had, and Janae, of course, knew that this was coming from Jim, thankfully, and was like, I know you don't hate me. I know you don't hate me. And that probably, helped. So we get a little bit in episode 2 of Jim's history. We learn that he was a star football player. So he had the worship, right, of
The
the small town,
accolades. Yeah.
and he gets a full ride scholarship to UCLA. But
So that's
then,
talent. That's talent.
yeah,
He had talent.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And he had a real promising future ahead of him. But then he gets his girlfriend pregnant and he loses the scholarship. And it's unclear if he lost the scholarship because he had to get married, or if, like, do they just not give you a scholarship because you got somebody pregnant? I'm unsure.
Well, it's interesting because I just covered another case. And in that same kind of time period, there was a police officer who was engaged and he was sharing a cabin with his fiance. And a guy broke into the cabin
Mm,
and sexually assaulted his fiance. So this cop arrests this guy. And the cop thinks, well, I'm going to get accolades at work because I not only made this arrest, but this is against my fiance. And the
yeah.
contrary happened. He almost got fired because he was sharing a cabin with a woman he wasn't married to.
Oh. Oh,
So I kind
wow.
of see the
Jesus.
correlation in this
Okay.
time period that maybe, not being married and impregnating someone was looked down upon by the university, that would be, a blemish on their reputation.
That's a good point, because it had to have been, he was born in 1941, so it had to be in the early 60s.
Right, right. Around that time
Absolutely.
period.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was angry about this, and Judy thinks that that may have shaped his view towards women. But we also learn later that he had a very bad relationship with his mother, that his mother was overbearing, really strict, and not very nurturing. So there's also that issue. We learned that he had a ranch where he brought girls and tried to rape them. One girl went to a school counselor and they fired Jim and he never taught again. But that didn't happen until, he had a lot of time to groom these girls.
Correct, correct.
So then we see the scene. This was interesting. Shannon goes on her school alum page and is like, "Hey guys, anyone else out there, was your life made a nightmare by my stepfather?" And people attack her.
Very much so. And,
That was
this is
gross.
what I find interesting about this part because, we saw the same thing in the Catholic priest scandal
Mm,
or in the Jerry Sandusky case, where there are all these people who say, oh, no, that father, he was excellent. He was wonderful to me. Or
mhm.
Jerry was a wonderful coach.
Mhm.
It's the vulnerable ones, the ones that are groomed, the ones that are personally selected and are isolated. The general masses don't necessarily see the nefarious activity that's going
Right.
on behind the curtain.
I think we see a lot of this with I'm thinking immediately of the Bill Cosby situation.
Another perfect
You
example.
know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
America's
Absolutely.
Dad or whatever. And it's like, no, no, no.
Correct. How they're curated isn't necessarily who they are in truth.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we have the introduction of the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders, and they took place from 1972 to 1973. And at the end, I want to save it for the end, but at the end, I want to ask you like what you think about
Okay.
this. But I'll just go
Okay.
through what is going on here. So this guy hogtied people, put them in ditches, and this is exactly what Jim used to talk about. The girls were the ages around 12, 13, 15, the same age that Jim liked to assault. They were from quote unquote broken homes. I hate that term, but that's what they were from. And in 1972, when this happens, Jim is going through a divorce with his first wife, is in a dark place, and his ex-wife moves to Santa Rosa, and he's doing a lot of, as you would, like a road trip to stalk people. And I could totally see this guy doing this. And he's using the 101 to get back and forth, and that's where a lot of these girls go missing along the 101. Jim grew up in Santa Rosa, so he would really know the area well. And there were 8 girls killed in 2 years. So at the end of episode 2, we meet Deb Rosa, who's a woman who's trying to keep, find justice for these girls and keep them in the spotlight. And Sierra goes out to see her, and they talk to a woman named Mary who's an eyewitness, and she describes the guy that the 2 victims went with. And she says he was much older. She says he looked more like a teacher to me than a student.
I thought that was interesting. The fact that she would
That was
use,
chilling.
of any words to pick, that she would
Yep.
pick those words.
Yep. She said he had short dark hair and he was slender, 5'10", wearing a denim jacket. We see a picture of Jim wearing a denim jacket, and she shows her a picture, and Mary's like, "Oh, like that really looks like him." So that's how we left episode 2, and I agree with you. That's where I was like, "Oh, this is getting interesting now."
Well, and interesting too was the fact that Mary says her friends meet this guy and he portrayed himself as, hey, I've got pot. Why don't you come with me?
Mhm.
And so the 2 friends go, but Mary doesn't. And she never saw these 2 friends again, Yvonne and Maureen.
Yes.
And one of the newspapers says that one of the earrings was missing from one of the victims. And as we're watching through this documentary, we find out that Shannon had found this jewelry box in Jim's
Creepy.
belongings with these odd items of jewelry that look more like teenagers' jewelry than real jewelry store jewelry, if you
Yep.
will.
Yep.
And there would be, one earring or a mismatched set of something. And she couldn't figure out, why does he have this jewelry? And then they find this news article that says one of the victims was missing an earring. And when Shannon hears about this newspaper article, she said, no, I know there was an earring like that in that jewelry box I found.
That was chilling. Because we know that sometimes serial killers do this, right?
They
They
keep
keep
souvenirs.
souvenirs. Ugh. So, episode 3, we meet Michael Probst, who was Janae's kid by her first marriage. And when Jim became his stepfather, he was an abusive nightmare. He made him beat people up. My heart broke for Michael.
He was such a nice guy. And
He
you could
was
just tell
such
that's
a nice
not how
guy.
he's wired to be that way.
No. Jim made him like go and beat up a kid who was bullying him. And Michael, he's moved to tears and he's like, that's just not who I am. Like, I'm not a violent person. He takes Michael out on drive one day and shows him where they found the dead body of a girl who was nude and hogtied. Then we see Sierra going to meet with Nina Hobson, who's a private investigator, and she lays out the case for Nina. And there's this really interesting scene where they have this map, and Sierra's putting all these little stickers where these 8 girls were found, and then she draws a red X where Jim's ranch was, and it's all pretty close.
Correct. And I mean, I think that really showed the homework Sierra had done. Like this isn't just a willy-nilly suck out of my thumb kind of
Mm-mm,
thought. She
mm-mm.
really did her research, and he was in proximity to all these different crime scenes and all these victims.
Sierra did a lot of work, and it's funny because I was talking to my mom about this documentary, and she's like, I loved it so much because that girl reminds me of you. She goes, if I'm murdered, I know you'd solve it. I'm like, okay, mom, I'll solve your murder.
Well, hopefully it'll never come to that.
So now we see that Jim gets cancer, and the women, it's interesting because there's finally like this sense of safety around them. And they're like, even Judy is like, I can breathe again, like not knowing he's and something that I'm kind of skating over, but if you watch the documentary, you'll see it. Like the abuse that Judy suffered was constant. And we
Yes.
learn little bits and pieces. He slammed her car in a trunk once. He, flipped over a table on Janae. Like the abuse that he put his wives through was just constant. We learned that Judy and Shannon's relationship ended after a harrowing drive home with Jim. So at
Yes.
one point, Shannon is a young mother. She has Sierra. She has to live with Judy and Jim. And it's not clear why, probably because she's a single mother and she's raising her child. And she's finishing up her school, and Jim is driving her back and forth from class. And one night he's driving her home. And this is another thing that is brought up repeatedly in the documentary, is that Jim seemed to have like a switch that would flip. And
Yes.
so he would go into this other zone. And so he's driving her home, and he cuts off the main road and he starts flying through these side roads. And he's like, she could tell he's really in a different place. And I forget what she says to him, but she somehow snaps him out of it. And she gets home and she's like, I'm done. And she takes Sierra and she leaves. And they didn't talk for 10 years.
Correct. Correct.
Wild. Hey everyone, stay tuned. Little Miss Recap will be right back after these words. So then the documentary goes in this place where they think he might be the Zodiac. What are your thoughts on this?
That's where I thought the documentary took a little bit of a left turn, because
Yeah.
after Shannon tells us about this horrifying drive home with
Mm-hmm.
Jim, Sierra says, well, I'm going to research and see if anybody else got, a horrifying ride home and jumped out of a car. And she finds some sort of similar occurrence. And that victim, who allegedly jumped out of some other perpetrator's car, went into the police station and looked up at a bulletin board and said, oh, that's the guy that had me, the Zodiac killer.
Right.
So from that random statement, Sierra makes the connection. Well, maybe Jim wasn't just the Santa Rosa hitchhiker killer. Maybe he was also the Zodiac killer. And that's kind of where I thought that may be a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, and I see like a lot of people online are ripping this part apart. And they're just like, why would they think you? But in the beginning, Shannon has a good point, and she's like, I know it sounds wild, but like somebody's father is the Zodiac, or you know what I mean? And I'm like, well, not necessarily. He might not have kids, but he is somebody's relative.
Correct. He's
Somebody's
somebody's
relative.
son,
Yes.
somebody's
Yes.
sibling, somebody's
Yes.
next door neighbor,
Hmm.
etc.,
Absolutely.
etc.
So, and then finally in episode 4, they meet with Ray Carr, who's a retired FBI profiler. And he tells them the Santa Rosa killer has the following characteristics. Because, I didn't say this, but the Zodiac thing is shot down by an
Correct.
expert. He's like, no, not happening. So Ray Carr says, here is the profile that I have come up with for the Santa Rosa killer. White male, mid to late 20s, worked with kids as a teacher or counselor. Familiar with the area, maybe experimented with animals, very confident in talking to young women. Might seem like a nice guy who could snap, probably a rapist, and may have been a voyeur. And then we do learn that he used to watch Shannon with her boyfriends. And then he says, probably collected souvenirs.
I
Dun,
mean,
dun, dun.
Yes. I mean, I have to say, I was really impressed with this former profiler, and
Yeah.
I've had experience with profilers.
Hmm.
And to me, they're either fantastic or they're not fantastic. There's like
Right.
one extreme or the other. And I thought he was very methodical and reasoned. And I didn't get any egotistical sense from him where, like, well, I'm going to tell you who this is. He's like, look, this is what I see. These are, what I view to be a realistic characteristic of who this person would be, what sort of occupations you would find him in, what sort of behavior patterns I would anticipate. So
Hmm.
I found him to be very, very credible.
Okay. I liked him too. And we have to remember that even though we watched the documentary, presumably he's going into this cold, not knowing Jim Mordecai. And what he comes up with, wow, it's
Correct.
really
And
chilling.
I just I'll give a shout out. There is another retired FBI agent by the name of Julia Cowley, and
Hmm.
she has a podcast called The Consult podcast, and it's all FBI former profilers. And I am a fan of hers. I will
Cool.
give her
Yeah.
5 stars. So if anybody's interested in profiling in cases that former FBI profilers have looked at, the Consult podcast is a very good one.
I'm so interested in profiling just because I'm interested in human dynamics. So I'm really interested in that field. I think it's so fascinating.
Well, you can really learn a lot by behaviors and talking to people and finding out what are people's fatal flaws. Like,
Mhm.
what are their ticks?
Mhm.
What gives them, a sense of accomplishment? What gives them a sense of irritation? And you can kind of really learn a lot about people based on their psychology and what they would be apt to do based on their personality.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was. Did you see, I'm sure you watched it already. What was the show? Was it on Netflix? Was it No, Manhunt? No, it wasn't Manhunt. It was the one where we learn about how they caught the guy from Atlanta who was killing people.
The
It's
Blood Mountain.
No, it's oh shit, this is going to bother me. It's where we learn how they established the behavioral analysis unit.
Oh, okay.
What
Okay,
is
sure.
it? I have to
Sure.
look it up now.
With John Douglas.
Netflix, Georgia murder. It's like right on the tip of my tongue. Oh, I'm not. Oh shit. It's not Manhunt. Mind.
Mindhunter.
Thank you.
That's all
Okay.
right. That's all right. Yes.
It's Mindhunter. What did
I
you think
I,
of that
I
show?
watched several of the episodes of the first season of that.
Mhm.
And basically what it is, it's a guy in the FBI who got the idea that, hey, if I go interview all these perpetrators and find out what their motivations are, I'll be better able to identify this if
Mhm.
I come across this in the future. And, it kind of raises a lot of like red flags right now because Brian Koberger was asking people to fill out a survey. Tell me what
Yes.
you were thinking about when you were doing your crimes.
Yes.
Well, is it because he had an interest in law enforcement or because he was thinking about committing crimes himself? That's
Yeah.
the, $1 million question right now.
Yeah, that case is wild.
It sure is, isn't
Is
it?
there a good documentary about that we know of?
No, well,
Not
there
yet.
is a documentary out. I wouldn't necessarily know if I'd say it's good. It's a
Yeah.
lot about the social media coverage of that
Oh.
case and how it has inflamed a lot of rumors and speculation
Mhm.
and both positive and negative impacts of the social media coverage.
Yeah.
And certainly there are some fascinating aspects as far as, was he Papa Roger and was he in chat rooms
Right.
and that sort of thing. But then there's also, kind of the negative side as to all the speculation about the roommates and
Right.
some things that haven't been validated about, why the roommates didn't call and,
Mhm.
what were they under the influence and, a lot of speculation. And people forget that the roommates are also true victims in this. Um,
Absolutely. It's so fascinating to me now that we have social media introduced into all of these cases. Like we saw it with Gabby Petito. People?
Yes,
Yeah.
very much. And, there the public really does help.
Yeah.
So it's a double edged sword. It really is. But certainly, when we look at, this case, social media has commented as well, especially about the Zodiac part.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So it kind of wraps up in episode 4 with them getting a DNA profile built of Jim Mordecai, and they use a bunch of different things: a knife that he has, a watch that he wore, his clippers from his hair. So they're able to develop a DNA profile, and then we see the last scene is Nina Hobson accompanies Sierra to the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, and she presents the case, she presents the DNA profile. Now they have DNA from the Santa Rosa
Correct. From at
killer.
least two victims, there was
Yes.
semen.
So that's kind of the end of the doc. But this is where I wanted to have a discussion with you of I have a couple questions. Number one is why does it why haven't they tested that DNA yet? We see this a lot with murder cases, right? Like they have DNA, but we see somebody like Kelly from Cold Justice who has to go around and beg them to test other DNA. Is testing DNA expensive? Is it
Yes.
okay? So that's what the issue is here.
Well, I think it could be one of two things. One, it is expensive for these local departments. They can't just test every time some Tom, Dick, and Harry comes in off the street and says, here's some DNA, run it against what you have.
Right.
Because remember, they've got a limited amount of sample. So
Right.
they got to make sure that if they're going to test it, one, that they
Mhm.
don't use up a lot of their sample, but number two, that there's enough sample left for eventual defense should this ever go to trial someday.
Okay.
So that's an issue. Cost is an issue. These departments don't have, an endless supply
Would you
of
say it's
money.
a cost in the thousands? Or are we
Oh,
talking?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
All right.
yes. And then I think also you got to remember, had it been negative, had they tested it and it was negative, we would know. So either they
Yeah.
haven't tested it or they have tested it, but their prosecutor wants to cross all T's and dot all I's and see, all right, well, we got two. Can we connect to other? Because you don't necessarily want to let the cat out of the bag right away.
Right.
Because if there is other evidence to obtain,
Mhm.
you don't want it destroyed while you're still trying to build the rest of the case. So it
Okay.
could be they're working on it, and we just don't know that yet.
But it also could be that they haven't tested it at all.
Correct. It could be
Okay.
either way.
I mean, Nina seemed, and I know she's a private investigator, but I'm sure she knows her stuff. She seemed really impressed with the case that Sierra presented. So when you look at this case through, I have here, could Jim be a murderer? Okay. All these women described the switch that would flip. He's a serial rapist. We see he had a hatred for women. He has also this weird relationship with religion where he talks in tongues. He talks about himself as a savior. He used to say he was Moses reincarnated. Okay, dude. Um she finds the jewelry box that seems to match a description like you said of an earring. He had a habit of taking long drives. Mary was the eyewitness. So we have a lot of, but what do we need? We need means, motive, and opportunity.
Correct.
In your opinion, do you think he meets any of those three?
Well, I certainly think he's got the behavior profile to escalate. I mean, if you're willing to commit violent sexual assaults, I don't think it's that big of a jump to go to the next level, which is killing someone, especially if those victims are fighting back.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, I think a propensity to violence, he certainly has demonstrated that. He seems to have the behavior where he likes to dominate and control and alienate.
Mm-hmm.
So, would he isolate women? Would he groom women? Would he target women who are vulnerable? Well, we've seen that pattern of behavior. So, I would say yes, he would. Opportunity, he's in proximity. And Sierra did an excellent job of putting that all together. Now, I do think two things really, really jumped out at me. Number one, all the references from the various family members of him constantly using the term hog tying.
Right.
That to me really jumped out. And then the fact that Michael said that he drove him by that one crime scene where
Mhm.
a victim's body was left, and he specifically says she was hogtied. To him, to me, I almost wonder if he had some sort of erotic fascination with hog tying, and
Yeah.
it was a sexual stimulus for him while committing a crime. And so to me, that really seemed significant. The fact that all these family members remember that, and it was so prolific that it happened so often. The fact he would mention, because that's not a word. I mean, I don't think I've ever used that word in my life,
No, no,
so it's
certainly
it's
not.
it's an odd, unique characteristic. But then I think, to me, the biggest tragedy, well, not the biggest tragedy, the biggest tragedy is the murder victims and the sexual assaults. But the biggest, I think, loss as far as evidence is that jewelry
I
box.
know. And you could see Shannon is, like, kicking herself because she says she just threw it away or gave it away.
I know. And
Ugh.
if you had that, you'd know. You'd know.
Yeah. How were the girls how were they murdered? Do we know this? Did I miss that? Were they strangled?
I
I
was
don't know.
thinking that. I'd
So
have to
they
go
don't
back.
make it very clear, I
They
don't
don't
think.
make it clear. But I do think,
Because he had a lot of guns. They talk about a lot of guns.
but we don't hear anything about ballistic
No.
matches
Mm-mm.
or, casings found or anything like that. We
No.
have semen on at least two of the hitchhiking victims. And I think, quite frankly, what I think is, will a local department compare Jim's DNA and spend the money that way? Or would they be better off spending the money on investigative genetic genealogy and taking that semen
Oh,
and
yes.
building the family skeletons? And then once they work through and
Yeah.
break it down, like, okay, who is a male in this area that is in this family? And does it fit any of the suspects that have been brought to us by the Sierras of the world?
That's a really good idea. Maybe that's what they're doing.
That's what I'm kind of wondering, is that, that may have already been in the works before Sierra ever knocked on their door.
Yeah.
Because after the Golden State Killer case,
Mhm.
people were like, look, this is the wave of the future. And
Yeah.
certainly we're seeing it across the board. We're seeing it with Koberger. We're seeing it with Gilgo Beach. We're seeing that this is the way cases are going to be worked. And
Yeah.
it's helping solve so many sexual assault cases from years ago and
Yeah.
finding serial offenders. And certainly, I think a lot of these unsolved murders are also being solved through genetic genealogy with DNA that's left behind. And DNA, the collection of it, it is just exponentially improving. Even in just the past few years with this MVAC
Yeah.
machine that's like a wet vacuum, that collects even more microscopic DNA than even touch DNA. I mean, it's
Wow.
finding things that couldn't be found even 5 years ago. So I
Mm.
really think that's the wave of the future. And if I were a local department, would I test every time someone came in and said, hey, I had a stepfather or I had a grandfather? Or would I
Right.
spend my money doing investigative genetic genealogy? I would do the IgG. That would be the route I'd go.
Yeah, that would seem to make sense because then you would have then you take that suspect and you compare it against everybody who's come in. That seems
Correct.
to be the better. Is it way more expensive though, or is it
It's
about the same?
expensive. It
Okay.
is expensive. However, there are so many nonprofits and people who are willing to donate to such
Yeah.
causes, especially when you've got multiple victims, like this hitchhiker
Right.
case.
I
And
could see
you've
the
got,
families maybe coming
yes,
together and
like, let's
yeah.
do GoFundMe's, and all the
Mhm.
money can be dedicated towards IgG on these semen samples. And
Mhm.
let's see what we can get. Can we build some family skeletons and narrow this down? I think the hitchhiker case is solvable. Whether
Mm.
it's Jim Mordecai or not, I don't know.
Does your gut lean one way or another if it's Jim Mordecai?
I am in line with the profiler. I do not think he can be eliminated. I don't think
Yeah.
this is just women who have
Yeah.
been victimized and are pointing fingers randomly at
Right.
you know, under misguided
Yeah.
reasons. And to me, I don't know if you saw The Keepers, the documentary on the
Yes.
Keepers about
Yep.
the nuns and
Yep.
Sister Kathy.
That was, ugh.
To me, there's a lot of parallels because there were a number of victims at that Catholic school. But then there were others who were like, what are you talking about? I had a great high school
Yeah.
experience.
Yep.
And so to me, it was very, very similar. And, there's been
Mhm.
questions all along. Why, if there was DNA found on a cigarette, why is this not being done through IgG?
Right.
And I almost think now that people know that there's DNA, there's more pressure to do all these techniques.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Huh. I wonder too if this is going to be the wave of the future where you have family members starting to come forward building their own cases, because now Sierra knows how to build a case because she's probably watched a million murder docs, as we all have. And so it kind of, like Gabby Petito, kind of turns us all into these amateur detectives. Does that help or hurt though? Is is my thing. I think it could hurt in many places.
Well, I mean, I know from my experience in law enforcement, especially once CSI and Law and Order and those types of shows became so
Mhm.
prolific, and people were watching multiple shows a week where, the crime is solved within an hour. When I would go to trial, they would think everything's recorded and that there's a video of everything. And,
Yes.
we see it a lot with the talk about Scott Peterson. And it's
Yeah.
like, look, you don't necessarily have foreign DNA
Right.
or foreign fibers or foreign hair or, some camera
Yeah.
video. And certainly not back in 2002, 2003 time period. I mean,
Mm-mm.
now, yes, now there's
Yeah.
ring cameras everywhere. There's Amazon trucks with cameras in them everywhere. We have people with cell phones. I mean, everybody walks around with literally a camera and a video recorder in their hands now.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's a different world. So, yes, in some ways, that is so beneficial. And I certainly saw when the Boston Marathon bombing happened, there's a lot of parallels between that case and when I worked the Centennial Olympic bombing in Atlanta.
Mhm.
When we were collecting photographs and videotape from Centennial Park, they were Kodak film pictures. It
Wow.
wasn't, people didn't have cell phones. And if they did have a cell phone, it was the size of a shoe. It wasn't,
Okay.
the size of your iPhone.
Right.
So when Boston bombing happened, they were inundated with video footage, almost to
Yeah.
the point where there's so much they couldn't get through it all.
Right. Um, one of the things I've seen online, one of the criticisms of this documentary is, and this drives me mad, is, but he doesn't have a criminal record. A lot of serial killers don't have a criminal record.
That's
Like, you're
exactly
not a
right.
criminal until you are.
Well, that's
Like
exactly. I
the
used to say that about bank robbers all the time.
Jesus.
Every bank robber is not a bank robber until they rob their first bank.
Right. Right. So, like, I think that drives me crazy, but please speak to that. Like, we see this a lot, right? Where somebody could be operating for years and not be caught.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the joke in the FBI was, well, we don't catch the smart ones. We catch the dumb
Right.
ones,
Right.
right? We catch the
Yes.
ones that make the
Yes.
mistakes. So,
Yeah.
yes, there are those that, especially the lone wolves, the loners, the ones who aren't social, that don't want the attention. I mean, that's part of the reason the Unabomber for years went
That was
undetected.
fascinating, that case.
And again, that was women that really, I mean, if you really do the research on the Unabomber case, there are a lot of guys that get credit for it, but it's the
Mhm.
women. It's
Mm,
the women behind the scenes that put two and two together.
of
The
course.
wife, the professor, the
Yeah.
female agent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Behind
Of
the scenes,
course.
women put that together.
Yeah. Well, there are some things that I wanted to end on that I did like in this documentary. I like to end on positive note. So what I loved about it were the conversations between Sierra and Judy, her grandmother, so heartwarming. Sierra saying, no matter what happens, the women in my family are finally able to put Jim Mordecai behind us and talk and heal. And Judy and Shannon talking, like I said earlier, was riveting to me when Judy said, I know you saw me as weak. And Shannon says to her, I did, but I also know that you were acting with learned patterns, which I thought was
Yes.
really interesting.
The
Because Judy
self,
says, like, I was raised to you obey your husband.
yes, the self actualization is just really, I mean, and I would say this to anyone who is listening that's a trauma victim or has experienced alienation and has been estranged due to, someone with a narcissistic personality like Jim Mordecai. You can come back together and you can heal. And I have
Hmm.
seen it, and you can end up stronger and have a better bond because, it takes a while, but once the self actualization happens between the multiple victims,
Hmm.
it's a bond that can't be broken because suddenly you
Yeah.
recognize, you don't know how toxic your environment is until you're almost removed from it. And that's what we really see. It took Jim dying of cancer
Yeah.
and then being removed from that toxicity to finally be able to realize, holy cow, the rest of, everybody else isn't dealing with what we were dealing with. This is
Right.
so, toxic. And when you're in that kind of forest, you can't see the forest from the trees, so to speak.
Yeah. When you're isolated, you really think, I am the only person going through this. And
Yes.
if you're somebody, who has been assaulted, you think you are the broken part. Like, this is something in you is broken, and this is what's going, and to just take all those broken pieces together and heal together is so, I loved it. I love that end scene where they all go to Michael's house, all the siblings, and they're just, we're a family and this is it. And it just really, I was riveted by that whole like subplot. I just wish it was either separated out, or maybe the first two episodes dedicated to that, and I don't know. It just was structured not in a great way.
I think that was my biggest problem with this documentary is the way it was produced. And
Yeah.
as a writer, you understand, like,
Yes.
the sequencing wasn't, it was
Drives
out
me
of order.
crazy. Yes,
Yeah.
drives me crazy. So let me ask you, what are some of your favorite murder documentaries or shows that you can recommend to my audience who love a good murder show?
Okay. So we've had a few really good ones this year already.
Mm,
First off,
okay.
American Nightmare on
We
Netflix.
covered that. That was wild.
That is fascinating. And
Hmm.
I mean, you talk about, frankly, I think that Detective Mustard, should have been fired. I mean, the comments he made to those sexual assault
He's
victims,
gross.
it was disgusting.
He's
And
gross.
again, hats off to the female detective. Thank God for her.
Yep.
So that is excellent. If you haven't watched American Nightmare on Netflix, another one I recommend is Blood Mountain. And
Ooh, I
that
didn't see this yet.
involves a serial killer that was going through multiple jurisdictions in northern Georgia,
Mm,
North Carolina, and Florida. And it's not the flashiest documentary, but it is riveting because it is literally a boots on the ground look
mm,
at how all these different departments in multiple jurisdictions were working their murders,
hmm.
suspecting they had a serial killer, how they all came together, what the prosecutors had to do, what their worries were, and then are there other victims of the serial killer and what other cases do they think are tied to it? It's really good. So I recommend that
Hmm.
one.
Let me ask you this about Blood Mountain. And you don't have to, this is not a spoiler, but is it a cold case still, or is it solved?
It's solved.
Okay, cuz I'm like so weird about cold cases. I need to know they're solved cuz
This
it
one is
freaks me out.
solved.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
this one is solved, and there are several. I should say there are several murders that were solved, so you will get
Okay.
satisfaction.
Okay.
But there are other killings that they think this perpetrator may have done. They
Okay.
just can't definitively say for sure or not.
Gotcha.
But to
Okay.
me, I can see why they're included in the documentary. So
Okay.
I think people, if you are a person who enjoys true crime documentaries, I really enjoyed that one. I thought it was very well done and very well plotted out. the
Okay.
way they present it to you. So I think that one's good. And then certainly there's some classics. If you haven't watched The Jinx with Robert Durst,
I have not watched that.
oh,
Oh, I need to
that
put that on
is
my list.
fantastic.
Oh, I've been meaning to get to that and I haven't.
That is a really good one. And when you see when he talks to himself in third person, I mean, chills.
Ugh.
So I would recommend that one. That's one of my top ones as well.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. We're always looking for good murder docs.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you can learn a lot.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot from these documentaries. And I don't, people make fun of women who are true crime obsessed and watch the Datelines in the 2020s. And I'm like, oh no, that's
We
how you
need
stay
to be.
safe.
Yes.
That's how you protect yourself.
Yes.
So don't ever apologize for watching.
I'm going through this with my daughters. I'm always like, I'm a nervous wreck. If you run out of gas and we live in a very rural area in Northeast Pennsylvania. And I'm always like, if you run out of gas and you don't have signal, here's what you need to do. Like, I'm always crazy about that stuff because I've seen a murder show about it. I know this is when you're vulnerable. Like, we know now what the risk factors are and what engaging in risk behavior, which to women is like walking down the street alone. Men will never understand that, but that is risk behavior for us.
Correct.
We know now like what that looks like and how to prevent putting yourself in a vulnerable position, but they still get to us.
Well, anyone, I would recommend to all women, whatever your age is. I've given this to my daughter and I've given it to my mother. I get birdie alarms,
Yes.
Have them on your keychain, have them on your purse. It's a simple little device. It literally is maybe the size of a cigarette lighter, and you just pull it apart and it sets off an alarm, and it can really, help you if someone's trying to steal your purse, if you feel uncomfortable, if they're invading your personal space, pull that. What's the worst that can happen? They get mad at you because you're making a noise. I mean, it's a great way to alert people that you could be in danger.
I'm ordering one right now. I bought the mace, but I feel like that's not enough.
Well, and on my website, jodeneweber.com, I'm an Amazon associate, and I link to safety products for people, whether it's for your home or your personal safety. And one of the products I have on there is pepper spray and spray gel. And some people like the spray gel better because it doesn't aerosolize back at you if there's a wind gust. But it never hurts to have some mace or some pepper spray or pepper gel.
Absolutely. All right, Jody. Well, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your expertise. So you're south of Pittsburgh. Are you near Falling Water?
Not far. Yes.
Okay. I've always wanted to make a trip out there to see it. My daughter, I think, is going to look at University of Pittsburgh. Okay. So I said, when I go out, I want to, because I've been in Pittsburgh a few times, but I have never made it to see Falling Water, and I really want to see it.
Yes. And, also out this way is the Flight 93 Memorial. That's about an hour east of me. Yeah. I'm literally halfway between Pitt and the University of West Virginia. Okay. So, you could go either way from my house. But yes, I'm Southwest Pennsylvania, and, I didn't know you were also in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so I'm about 10 minutes north of Scranton.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, very well. Yes.
Tell everybody where they could find you and what you're doing on your podcast.
Yes. You can find my podcast 5 days a week on patreon.com. I cover breaking true crime news. And then twice a month on the weekends, I have a bonus tier where I cover cold cases that are unsolved. I dig into those, try to tell you, what I think, how they can be solved, that sort of thing. So that's called Caught in My Web. It's on patreon.com. I'm on Twitter at Jodene Weber, TikTok Jodene Weber, Facebook Jodene Weber, and Instagram is Weber Jodene.
All right. Awesome. I hope that you'll come back again.
Oh, I would be honored to. Thank you so much,
And
Amy.
We could absolutely solve another murder. Not that we solved this, but we could try.
And we can talk twins.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.